going on, everyone? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit preview podcast. This is Before the Roar podcast / well, now it's officially on YouTube so that you guys can actually watch this from beginning to end. Basically, where we take a look ahead to the Lions' upcoming opponent. This week, the Lions will be squaring off against the Baltimore Ravens on Monday Night Football. So we're a little ahead of time, but it's better for us to get this stuff out earlier. This way you have more time to watch it and enjoy it and share it with other people. I'm your host, Miko, joined once again by my amazing co-host. First and foremost, we have one of your writers over at prideofdetroit.com, Morgan Cannon. Morgan, how's it going, my man?
Guys, feeling good, feeling great. Last weekend was good, and I'm happy to be here with y'all.
Same, man. It's I love the mellow vibes. We're going to keep it kind of mellow to start, but obviously we're going to talk about the Lions win as well, at least recap that a little bit before we jump into looking ahead. And then also joining us as well is Brandon Knapp, another one of our writers over at prideofdetroit.com. Brandon, how you feeling, my man?
Feeling better than I felt last week. I don't feel defeated. I don't feel sad. I feel excited, energetic, and I'm just ready to see this game on Monday.
I said the same thing on the POD cast. Like, because we got a win, I actually felt good enough to watch more football. Like, football wasn't ruined for the entire day. So the fact that, we got to have that, and then obviously this week with the Lions playing on Monday night, we get to enjoy a full Sunday of just watching whatever game's on, not really having an interest in any other team other than just waiting and sitting back until Monday Night Football kicks off. But before we jump into that, let's take a look back at week 2 and what the Lions were able to do against the Chicago Bears, beating the Bears. What was that? 52-21.
Yep.
Morgan, first and foremost, biggest impression coming out of that win.
It was a beautiful thing, man. Like, you could I was sitting at the game, and I turned to my friend Sweta at one point. Oh, when the Lions had that 5-play sequence that I mentioned in the Slack channel, where it was just chunk, 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 and it ended with that Brock Wright play action pass into the flat. I turned to Sweta and I said, "Blood in the water," and she was like, "Yeah." And I was like, yeah, it's about to get. And I don't say stuff like that because I'm really big on not jinxing people. Y'all always see me if you're new to the channel or if you're listening to the podcast, I'm always knocking on wood here on my desk or potentially on my head too, just to make sure. But yeah, I turned to Sweta. I was like, blood in the water, man. And she, sure enough, it got pretty crazy pretty quickly. So it was fun to be at. Cool to see them execute. They're still, like we talked about before we hopped on, there's things that they can do better, especially defensively, in my opinion, from that game. But all in all, pretty good. What about you, Brandon?
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good overall performance. I was just really happy to see the offensive line not even make, in my opinion, any real mistakes that kind of caught me off guard. They did really well protecting Goff, didn't allow any sacks. The run game could be better. Again, that's something that they can improve upon, but definitely a step up than we had last week. Defense finally made some turnovers, made some good plays. Overall, special teams could use some work, but this team ain't perfect. We're going to keep going. We're going to keep chugging along. Miko, I am just ready to kind of think about Baltimore and see if we can have an upset.
Absolutely. And if you guys want any more additional content or any more feedback on how we feel about or just some of the biggest takeaways to come out of that Chicago game, you can always go over to prideofdetroit.com. I know Morgan has done a film study that's over there breaking down some of the performance of Christian Mahogany and Tate Ratledge. Or is that up already? I know you were polling people on Twitter about whether or not which one you should do. So
I'm proud of y'all for voting on that because it got like 70% of the votes or something like that almost. So yeah, proud of you guys. That is up over at prideofdetroit.com. So definitely check that out.
Okay, awesome. And I know Jeremy and Eric also did a film study, I believe mostly looking at the defense and some of the things that kind of went on in that game as well. And you can find that over on the YouTube channel over at prideofdetroit.com or youtube.com/prideofdetroit as well. So Brandon, you kind of teed it off there. We're going to jump ahead and look ahead to the Baltimore Ravens. Both teams are currently 1-1 on the season. Baltimore is coming off of a pretty big division win against the Cleveland Browns. Second week in a row, guys, where they've been able to put up over 40 points, beating the Cleveland Browns 41-17. Lamar Jackson at this point is playing at the level that we kind of expect him to. It's kind of weird because the numbers aren't eye-popping when you look at the box score, but if you've ever gotten the chance to watch Lamar Jackson play, it's magic, right? And I think that's one of the things that the Lions have to be focused on, right, Brandon, when it comes down to what this matchup is going to look like come Monday night.
Yeah, Lamar is playing lights out. I mean, he's doing great. I mean, he didn't do much last week on the ground against Cleveland, but Cleveland said, feed us through the air. And Lamar said, all right, bet, 19 completions. And he threw, 3 or 4 touchdowns. So either way, Lamar is going to be the backbone of that offense. I know Derrick Henry is a big focal point, but when you have a quarterback playing like Lamar, who arguably could have been MVP last year too, it's tough to kind of overcome. What about you, Morgan?
Yeah, like for me right now, as it stands, with respect to Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow and some of these other guys, there are two players that inspire fear in me. And I'm not really a scaredy guy, if you know me. So, but two players, and they're Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. So he's just that kind of force multiplier to me, man. Like he's the type of guy, I was thinking about this, like you could drop him on one of the worst rosters in the league right now, depending on who you ask. And I think that would be probably like a 7-8 win team just because he's that kind of playmaker with the ball in his hands, both as a runner, as a passer now. Don't get it twisted. That man is a nuanced and developed passer who throws with anticipation and isn't scared of anything in the pocket or on the run for that matter. So yeah, he's playing out of his mind. The stats aren't eye popping, but at this point, he's just, I don't know, like just a machine at this point, right, Miko? Like there's no really, I think we do need to set expectations early that completely neutralizing Lamar Jackson is probably out of the question. And it's more so to get a stop here and there and do your best to outpace them, right?
Yeah, when it comes down to whether it's Lamar Jackson or just this Ravens offense as a whole, it feels very much like a pick your poison type of matchup, right? And while Lamar is off to a pretty hot start, again, the yardage numbers aren't crazy, but he's getting his team into the end zone. They're putting up points. The area where it looks like maybe the Lions will put a lot of their focus in it, just, I mean, again, if I'm projecting and assuming what the Lions might have in mind, it is going to be about limiting that run game because Derrick Henry is off to a fairly slow start. I mean, 11 carries last week, only 23 yards against the Browns. That is something that I think the Lions are going to look at and they're going to say like, hey, we're probably going to try and put Lamar Jackson into a lot more situations where he's going to have to try and beat us with his arm. But we'll get to that a little bit in the second segment as well. One thing to kind of point out, normally when we do these, if this is your first time ever watching or listening to this podcast, we try to usually give an injury report just so that we can kind of level set where both rosters are going into this matchup. Because this game is on Monday, that injury report has not yet been released. But once again, this is one of the benefits of having prideofdetroit.com because that news will be over at the website. So if you're not already following us on all of our social medias or just tapping into the website on a regular basis, I highly encourage you guys to do that just to stay locked into just any other news that may be breaking for both of these teams as we get closer to Monday Night Football. But Morgan, going into this game, Baltimore is favored by 4.5 points. Is that about what you expected kind of when this matchup was even first set, back when the schedule was released?
Yeah, because I think it was 5.5. I think Brandon had told me, and then my friend had texted me that it just went down to 4.5. And that was like she had texted me like an hour or two ago. So a recent development, but that makes sense. You get 3 for being at home typically. Another 1.5, but honestly, it could be bigger. Like I wouldn't have had my feelings hurt if this thing opened up at 6.5, just because people were so reactionary to the Green Bay game and what happened there. But, I'm scared. Like I said, I'm scared of Lamar, no doubt. Like he's one of my favorite players outside of the Lions for sure. Love watching him play. Yeah, but I'm not surprised to continue to set the table. They still got Todd Monken as their offensive coordinator, who was with Georgia, if you guys remember. And really that game where they beat the Lions over the head with a baseball bat in 2023, that was really Todd Monken's coming out party. Because like it was early in the season and he hadn't really hit people with all the okey dokes yet, but he pulled them out against Detroit. And they kind of got the brunt of it, like a little bit of a buzzsaw situation. Defensively, they're still running the 3-4 under a former player, if you guys remember, Zach Orr. So a similar path to a Kelvin Shepard, if you will. The spine of their defense is excellent. You got Kyle Hamilton, Matabuke, and Roquan Smith. So just setting the table a little bit more. And I think it's going to be crucial that the Lions limit them, like you talked about, Miko, like picking their poison. For me, it's going to be shutting down runs. Like I don't want Derrick Henry to get going. If Lamar gets a little something here and there, that's fine, but we can't deal with all of that the whole game. You know what I'm saying? If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I completely see where you're going with that train of thought. I do want to like kind of focus a little bit on the defense though first, because I think looking at how the Lions are coming out of the Chicago game, and a lot of people are high on this offense once again, and I think we at least for the time put to bed the idea that Ben Johnson was the true and end all be all of this offense, Brandon. And now we have to kind of shift focus into how can this Lions offense, attack this Baltimore defense, because like Morgan said, like they do have some real impact players when you talk about Kyle Hamilton, who is arguably seen as one of the top 5, maybe even top 3 best safeties in the NFL. Adabuke is someone that is absolutely, a handful in the middle, and then Roquan Smith as well, one of the top, middle linebackers in the league as well. Where do you see the Lions need to really kind of put their focus to be able to hopefully, find some cracks in this Baltimore defense?
I think it starts with just controlling the ball as long as you can. You need to have the time of possession to just win that battle. Because if you're winning that battle, that's keeping Baltimore's offense off the field as long as possible, keeping your defense rested, getting ready to go out there. So Detroit needs to just limit the clock, run a lot on the ground. And I think David Montgomery, this could be a game where he's used a little bit more than Gibbs just because of his physicality. So if Detroit's going to be on the field longer, Baltimore's defense is going to start getting gassed. They're not just going to get tired, from being on the field for so much, but they're also going to get beat up from Montgomery. They're going to get beat up by this offensive line that had a great bounce back performance last week. So I think this week could be even better for them when it comes to the ground attack, because Baltimore's defensive line, like I was telling you before we started, Miko, Baltimore's defense doesn't scare me as much as it used to in the way back. Obviously, he's a lot better players like way back with Ray Lewis, Ed Reed, etc. But this defensive line doesn't scare me as much. So I think Detroit can take advantage of that. But the longer that they have the ball, Morgan, I really think that's going to benefit the team greater than anything else.
Yep. As your best defense against Lamar Jackson is to just simply not have him be on the field, because I don't think they want to play him on defense. But no, seriously, they still do have players like you mentioned. They have it's Nnamdi, Madubuike, Roquan Smith, like Kyle Hamilton. So like the spine is super tough. So yeah, if you can continue to control the ball, like just don't give it to him. Keep that time of possession, like you talked about, Brandon, well in your favor. And if you can do that and just like rack up first downs and chew up clock, I think that's going to be your best bet, especially being on the road, right, Miko?
Absolutely. And I think when you look at the fact that Baltimore has kind of struggled stopping the run in the first 2 weeks of the season, giving up over 115 yards to Cleveland and then also giving up over 109 yards to Buffalo in those first 2 weeks. Again, the Cleveland game was not nearly as close, by the end of it, Baltimore getting a pretty sizable win there. But that Buffalo game was very back and forth. And I think that does have a lot to do with that defense still figuring things out, because they have added and adjusted a few things as far as pieces. It's also worth pointing out that while we don't have an injury report of like everyone that may or may not be available, like we have already heard that Kyle Van Noy is likely going to be out for the next few weeks. So that's a big time benefit, to this Lions offense in terms of being able to not have to worry about that premier pass rusher. And if the Lions could kind of control things, get into more favorable down and distances and stay out of those third and long situations, you do give, Jared Goff much more time and space to be able to hopefully link up with an Amon-Ra St. Brown or a Jamison Williams or any of those other skill players. I will say though, Morgan, when it comes to Madubuike, that is someone that I think I would probably circle and have a big time focus on, especially when you talk about how fresh this interior offensive line is. They had a great bounce back game against Chicago, but Madubuike is on another level when you talk about interior penetration.
Yeah, and they can move him around, right? Like in that 3-4, they have him at the big end. They'll roll him inside on pass rushing downs. So yeah, he's a problem for sure. So that'd be someone I would circle and put a star next to. But I really liked your point. We talked about like just continue, like put Jared Goff in good situations. So by throwing, like the Lions threw a bunch of stuff at Chicago, like counter, wham, when I was charting it, like they got back to their bread and butter. They're like, all right, we're going to mix it up. We're not just going to run duo or, inside zone whenever we panic and just kind of become predictable. They started, you get the defense flowing left and right. That's when you can start gashing them. And that's what you saw against the Bears. So I would like to see more of that. And like to your point, I don't want to be in a lot of third and obvious passing downs, just being on the road. I know it can get loud at the bank. So like you talked about, Miko, stay in those favorable positions. And so you can put Jared Goff, like get him to link up and make those big plays that we saw against Chicago, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And Brandon, when you look at the secondary of Baltimore, they have made some additions. They've made some adjustments around. But I mean, when you look at their two starting corners of Nate Wiggins and Marlon Humphrey, those are two guys that are fairly physical at the position. Marlon Humphrey maybe a little bit more so than Nate Wiggins. It'll be interesting to watch like how they line up and who they match up with in this game, because I would think that if you're Baltimore, you maybe want to put Marlon Humphrey and Amon-Ra St. Brown and have Nate Wiggins try and stick with Jamison Williams. But I still think like seeing how that battle is going to go between the Lions wide receiver core and this Baltimore secondary could be worth watching.
Yeah, and the thing that scares me about the Baltimore defense, at least, is their secondary for how strong their depth is. You know, you talk about their two starters in Wiggins and Marlon Humphrey, but they also have Jair Alexander, who probably is going to play. There's no confirmation. He missed last week, but I would assume he's probably going to be out there. And then they also have Chidobe Awuzie, who we all talked about before the podcast. We all like him. He's a really good corner. He's somebody that I wanted the Lions to even sign before they got Rocky Sin. So those four, that's a solid four that you have out there. And like Morgan was saying earlier, you have Kyle Hamilton, who's just phenomenal. So it's definitely going to be a matchup. You know, could Isaac Taslaw maybe, get off and kind of break out a little bit in this game because everyone's going to be focusing on Jamison and on Amon-Ra? I don't know. It's definitely could also be a time for maybe Sam Laporta gets his time because, there's just going to be linebackers on him. Roquan's really good linebacker. But overall, Miko, it's definitely going to be the part of the offense for the Lions against the Baltimore Ravens defense that I'm going to be watching the most because it's going to be so tight, so close.
Yeah, it almost feels like when it comes to the Lions offense, it almost sounds like we all feel fairly confident that the Lions offense can find some success, at least in the ground game, but it's a matter of like almost like you were kind of saying, Morgan, earlier, where it's like you kind of can't afford any slip ups, really. Like you're going to almost have to play near perfect football just to make sure that you can limit what Lamar Jackson's going to do to you on the offensive side, which is exactly what we're going to talk about on the other side of this break. So stay tuned right here. We'll be right back after this. And welcome back to Before the Roar, your Pride of Detroit preview podcast, where we take a look at the Lions' upcoming matchup. This week, they will be going up against the Baltimore Ravens on Monday Night Football. Guys, in the first segment, we primarily focused on how the Lions offense can attack the Baltimore Ravens defense. But at the end of the day, we know the number one thing that everyone's going to be kind of focused on, which is how the hell are the Lions going to contain this Baltimore Ravens offense that is fueled by Lamar Jackson? Morgan, you said it in the first segment, someone that really strikes fear in I'm pretty sure every fan base across the NFL. Not to mention, you still have to deal with a Derrick Henry. You have to deal with a Zay Flowers. Mark Andrews is getting up there in age, but he's still one of a pretty impactful tight end as well. Where do the Lions even begin to try and contain, this offense?
I like that you use the word contain. And that's something I thought we were talking about. I don't know why my brain, probably just subconsciously, I had to talk about Lamar first. But yeah, that's the only thing you can really hope to do. All right. So maybe there's a world in which the Lions completely neutralize Lamar Jackson on a Monday night game. They don't want to start 1-2 either. That's the thing, right? Like that's what I think fans need to remember. The Ravens also do not want to start 1-2, although their division might be a little bit easier to deal with now, considering some of the things going on with Cincinnati and whatnot. So I want to make the point that I was making earlier. If you can just keep them out of just completely neutral downs. What I mean by a neutral down is like it's 2nd and 4, or it's 2nd and 2. That's what you don't want to have Baltimore in a lot, because they can hit you with the kitchen sink. They can hit like a design run for Lamar that gashes you. They can hand it off to Henry, like you said, Miko. They have like D-Hops out there, and Lamar is a tremendous passer at this point in his career. He just is. So that's kind of my only really recipe that I could have conjured up in my head where they can maybe hope to slow Baltimore down, is just limit them with traditional handoffs. Like I want to see a performance like Cleveland turned in last week, where Derrick Henry's stat line looks like 11 carries for 23 yards. I think that would work. But yeah. I think that's where you start. You know what I'm saying? What do you think?
I agree. I think if I had to draw up a game plan of how do I contain Lamar Jackson, it's not even necessarily containment either. It's more like shepherding. Like I want to shepherd him towards the pass game. Like I would rather it be that, because Brandon, if it's If it's the run game as well, then I also have to worry about design runs. Then I have to worry about play action. I would rather have him in so many more like third and long situations so that I know I can at least kind of predict what's going to happen. And that does kind of, it's not necessarily putting Derrick Henry at the forefront in my mind. It is still keeping Lamar Jackson at the forefront because you understand that his legs unlock so much of this offense.
Yeah, I think number one, as Morgan pointed to it earlier, you have to contain Lamar. If you can contain him, make sure he's not getting in the running lanes, you're going to do well. And looking at PFF, Baltimore's already allowed 5 sacks this season. They're on pace for 42.5. Now, obviously, they're not going to allow 2.5 per game. We all know that. But if they were to, keep struggling, then that's going to be like the worst offensive line, Lamar's been behind. We were talking before, Ronnie Stanley has been struggling so far this year. Tyler Lindenbaum, their really good center, hasn't been good at pass blocking. He's been good at run blocking, but pass blocking hasn't been a strong suit. So that's where the Lions need to go ahead and strike, is with their pass rush. Now, obviously, you got to talk about the wide receiver trio. You got DeAndre Hopkins, Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman. All of them are good. All of them are going to be tough to go against. And then even though Mark Andrews is getting up there, like you were saying, Miko, he is, still Mark Andrews. He can still be respectable. But Isaiah Likely, if he can't go, that's going to be easier for Detroit to go ahead and focus on Mark Andrews if they want. But if Isaiah Likely's out there, that's even more, problems for this defense, So I really think it comes down to the pass rush. And sure, you can limit Derrick Henry's touches, but if you get out to a big enough lead, that's going to force Baltimore to just pass the ball repeatedly. But if Baltimore gets up enough, they're up by 10 points, they're just going to ground and pound you, and Derrick Henry is just going to be a problem. We've seen him truck people left and right, Morgan, and I just really feel like overall Derrick Henry will be limited if Detroit can get enough to a big enough lead in the end.
I love that you
Listen.
Oh, go ahead. Go, Miko.
But all I was just going to make a joke. As much as I love our safeties, the last thing I need to see on Monday night is Brian Branch or Kirby Joseph trying to tackle Derrick Henry in space. I want no parts of that at all.
Just to stay healthy and happy. So, yeah, and I love that you brought up the dictating of pace, Brandon. Like, if the Lions can get out to even a 10 or a 13-point lead, it's not safe, but at least you can kind of dictate the pace. So, like, at this point, man, Lamar, through 2 weeks, ranks third, in both EPA per dropback and average air yards per attempt. Both of those stats are per NFL Pro. So I talked about it. Him and Allen are kind of in a league of their own at the moment, just in terms of being playmakers and being so dominant with the ball in their hands. But yeah, I loved your point, Brandon. If you got to neutralize Henry, neutralize the traditional handoffs, keep them in third and obvious passing down so you can crush the pocket and not let him escape and get the big play off. I don't want that to happen, because if you make them earn it, I feel a little bit better. But like that game that they got boat raced in 2023, Baltimore's gashing them. It was like giant play here, big play here. It was explosive there. So I don't want that to happen, because like you talked about, Brandon, then you're chasing them and you're at their mercy at that point. And at home, yeah. No, thank you.
Yeah, 2 things that I think that they really also need to focus on, the defense specifically for the Lions, is one, communication. And I think like communication and trust. Like we've heard this coaching staff preach that stuff in the past. The secondary is going to have to trust the guys in front of them. Like when it comes down to containing Lamar Jackson in the run game, you can't get caught like peeking into the backfield. You can't be late or slow with your feet in terms of, allowing some of these wide receivers to get deep into their routes and to be able to stack you and be able to create separation, because that's where Lamar can really hurt you. And they will take their deep shots and they will start to move the ball down the field very, very quickly. So I feel like if the secondary can kind of trust that the linebackers and the D line is going to do their job in terms of just corralling him and keeping him within the pocket, then they can just focus on covering the guys that they need to cover. The other thing I wanted to point out as well, it's not the same caliber of athlete. So I don't even want to say, well, because they did this, then they can easily do this as well. One thing that I will put in the Lions' favor is that when you look at their game against Chicago last week, they did a really good job of limiting Caleb Williams and what he was able to do with his legs. And yeah, like you said, Morgan, really just keep him in the pocket. And even when he was getting flushed out, not giving him the space to be able to really set and throw or be able to make big time throws down the field. So the mindset becomes the same, right? In terms of how you want to attack this Baltimore offense. The execution is going to look drastically different because Lamar Jackson is just a different caliber of athlete and quarterback, just straight up playmaker than what we saw with Caleb Williams last week. But I think Brandon, when you look at just the overall scheme and the mindset, like it has to be that.
Yeah, 100%, absolutely. I was really impressed with how Detroit's defensive line contained Caleb Williams last week. I was expecting him to kind of break out. Just watching him bounce around the Vikings defense, I was like, this is not going to be clean. And they did well. I mean, even they got him to roll out to the right, and I thought he was throwing a duck out of bounds, and Kirby said, nope, I'm picking that off. So if they can even do that against Lamar, that would be impressive. Because I know sometimes Lamar can think he can make a throw, and it's nothing clean. So Miko, I really think Detroit's defensive line really needs to get after him, pressure him, and if they can get him down, awesome.
If the Lions can force 2 takeaways, I think that would be a recipe. If they win the turnover battle, if they're +2 in turnover margin, that would be a way the Lions could steal this game, in my opinion. It would require something like that, Miko. You know what I'm saying? Like three sacks, 2 takeaways. What do you think?
No, it definitely has to be that, because you're either going to need, as the Lions, you're going to either need more bites at the apple to either keep pace or just to be able to keep a lead, or at the very least, like we talked about in the first segment, like just being able to keep Lamar off the field by getting a few takeaways and cutting some of those drives short so that they're not, getting into field goal range and even putting up, field goals that way. Like anything that you can do to help keep your offense in the more advantageous position, because I think the Ravens offense, in my opinion, does have an advantage over the Lions defense. Again, by looking at Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry alone, that's a force multiplier on that. But I think on the flip side of that, the Lions offense could very well get the better of the Ravens defense. And so like that's where it could kind of become a bit of a shootout in this game. And it could come down to which team makes the big mistake first, which team is giving up turnovers, which team is going 3 and out, more frequently to kind of have this game lean in the other, in the other's favor. So with that kind of in mind, let's kind of shift focus over to X factors. So this is a segment of the podcast where we like to look at both the offensive and defensive side of the football for the Detroit Lions and say which players we believe need to have a really big performance in order to ideally swing the game in the Lions' favor. So Brandon, why don't you kick us off with your X factor on the offensive side of the football?
I mentioned earlier, it's got to be David Montgomery. It's just the strength that he has to kind of loosen up that Ravens defense, plow through the defenders, get those tough extra yards, and slowly move the ball down the field. We're not going to want to go ahead and score in 3 plays. It'd be great, awesome, but that's not giving the defense any much to really kind of be gassed about. So if Monty can slowly get those big chunks here and there and just do 3 yards per carry, just boom, 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 takes 3 carries for a first down, keep working that way. That's who I see right now as my offensive X factor. Morgan, who you got?
I'm going to go with Jameer just because it's a primetime game, and I think he's aware. I haven't watched all of his episode on the St. Brown podcast, but I want to. Just seems so much more confident. He's got all these endorsement deals. It would be a statement for him on his on the way to maybe some serious hardware at the end of the season if he went bananas on Monday Night Football and the Lions beat the Ravens. You know what I mean? So I'm going to go with Jameer there just because they could use a couple. You want to control the time of possession for sure. I get what you're saying, Brandon. But if you can get a couple, 60-yarder here, 50-yarder there, that'd be all right too, just because that stresses the defense. Where are you at on that side of the ball, Miko?
First of all, I love the fact that you both picked Sonic and Knuckles, because I do think that is a big part of that this Lions team is going to lean on, especially when you look at the Ravens, more recent struggles against defending the run. I actually went with Amon-Ra St. Brown though, because I think in the grand scheme of what I think the Ravens are going to try to do, it's going to try to be to limit the run. They're going to try and really bottle up Jameer and David Montgomery in that way. I would love to see the Lions come out in a similar way that they did against Chicago and really stress and lean and attack that secondary with Amon-Ra St. Brown and really challenge a Marlon Humphrey, really challenge a Nate Wiggins to see if they can actually cover one of the top 5 best wide receivers in the NFL right now, and see if that can actually open up rushing lanes as if you're consistently picking them apart in the passing game across the middle and things like that. That can unlock your running game. That can unlock a Jamison Williams. That can unlock a Sam Laporta. I think as fans, we sometimes get so fixated on it has to be the running game. But I think last week we saw it can be the passing game, and that can be the key that really starts this engine of this offense. But with that said, what do you guys think about your defensive X factors? Morgan, I'll start with you.
So I'm going to go here with my guy, Brian Branch, BB, just because I do think there's going to be more than a couple plays where Lamar is out of structure in the open field. And BB is one of the best athletes on the field at all times, one of the strongest, especially pound for pound, probably the strongest, but even just raw strength, that man is just so strong. So I'm going to go Brian Branch just because even if it's not turnovers, even if it's just getting Lamar Jackson down in space a couple of times, I think that's where he'll need to come up big just because I'm kind of anticipating. I do think the Lions, to your guys' point, I do think the offense is going to score against Baltimore. They're going to be hopefully feeling themselves in a good way, like in a good space after the Chicago game, and settle in and hopefully start like clicking a little bit better. So, then that kind of opens up. Lamar's like, oh, okay, so I gotta go crazy too. So yeah, we need a big performance from BB. What about you, Brandon? Where you at?
I'm going to go to another guy that's also really strong. I'm going with defensive tackle DJ Reader. Now, while he does dominate, he's more of a run-stopping defensive tackle. That'll be great for slowing down Derrick Henry. I kind of do want to see Derrick Henry try and run into DJ Reader. I know they played each other, Cincinnati and Baltimore for years. Or actually, no, they didn't play each other. Derrick Henry wasn't there yet. So I don't know if we've ever seen that before, but that'd be a fun battle to kind of go ahead and see. But also, not even, he's not known for being a pass rusher, but if he can even just clog the middle and force Lamar to go to the outside, that is where I think he kind of plays the biggest role is clogging up that middle lane with Tyleek or whoever else is next to him. And then that way, Lamar has to go out to the left or the right and, run into Hutchinson, run into maybe Davenport if he's out there. If not, Al-Qadim Muhammad. So if he can just clog the middle, Miko, I really think DJ Reader can have an impact.
No, absolutely. I think that's where there's going to be a lot of focus put on both DJ Reader and Tyleek, as well as Roy Lopez, as well as Pat O'Connor. Makai Wingo is back. There's going to be a lot of emphasis of like, hey, really being able to clog those rushing lanes and kind of keeping everything in front of them. I went with like a little bit of a dark horse here with Alex Anzalone. And specifically, like it honestly has nothing to do with Lamar Jackson. It has nothing to do with Derrick Henry. It has nothing to do with Mark Andrews. For some reason, and call me crazy, I am getting like weird flashbacks to Ty Johnson kind of like torching the Lions defense back when Josh Allen played the Lions last week. And there was so much emphasis put on limiting, Josh Allen's like impact in terms of targeting his receivers and things like that. And the thing that killed us was the running back that like no one probably had on their radar as the person that could be the most dangerous. And that's kind of how I feel going into this game with the Ravens, where we literally have talked so much about Lamar. We talked a good amount about Derrick Henry. We probably haven't given enough credit to Zay Flowers, Rashad Bateman, and D-Hop, who DeAndre Hopkins has been starting to look like the DeAndre Hopkins of old. But the name that I'm a little like keeping an eye, I wouldn't even say worried about, I just have my eyes on him because I refuse to be caught off guard again, is Justice Hill. Justice Hill is their third down back. He's kind of like more of their pass catching threat. If I were Baltimore and I was looking at like, hey, how did the Lions do against the Bills last year when they had to go against like one of the best quarterbacks in the league? Oh, they couldn't cover the second string running back. I think Alex Anzalone, who I don't believe played in that game last year, having Alex available to not just only cover Justice Hill, but also, obviously be a matchup for Mark Andrews as well. Like that could be something that could really be advantageous to the Lions of having him and how good he is in coverage to be able to at least eliminate that aspect of the offense as well. We know they're going to try and focus on stopping the run. They're going to obviously let their secondary go out there and make plays in the passing game. But you kind of can't forget about these other, second and third string guys that could potentially hurt you as well in other areas of the game.
Justice Hill runs hard too, man. I know he's a pass catching back too, but that man runs hard. Like I feel like he's bigger than he actually is. Like when you look at his like measurables, but yeah, that's a really good call, honestly, because when I do watch the Ravens play, I feel like he's typically making plays when he does like get afforded the opportunities.
Well, he's like he almost becomes one of their go-to targets, especially when they're in third and long situations, because Lamar has to probably do so much dancing because they're sending so much pressure at him. And then it's like, okay, cool, I'm just dump it off here to my running back. And like you said, Justice Hill runs really, really hard. And so it's something that, like I said, I have in the back of my mind. I almost picked dude up in fantasy because that's how much I was like, he might go off this week. But I think if the Lions can kind of, again, have their entire linebacker core, honestly, like locked in and being able to support in the run game, but also play well in coverage, you can do a really good job of limiting this Baltimore offense. So with that said, guys, final segment of this podcast, or final section of this podcast, let's get into score predictions. Morgan, why don't you kick us off with how you see this game kind of playing out this week?
Man, I wanted to do it, y'all, but I do think the Lions will cover. But I'm going to go 31-28 Ravens. Hopefully, we all pick the Ravens, because I bet you everyone on staff might. And then the Lions do that thing where they troll they put like the whole block of picking the wrong team and do some sort of meme after that. I would love that. I would actually love that. So hopefully that happens. But yeah, 8 Ravens.
B-Nap, what you got?
I do not have the Lions covering. I really think Baltimore is just, the Lions are good. They're a good team. Baltimore is also a really good team. I just think, as we've all been talking, it's just not a good matchup. I have Baltimore winning 31. Their offense has been scoring 40-plus points 2 weeks in a row. I think Detroit can hold them under to 40, but I just don't see it being as close as, the Vegas Lions giving it, Miko.
Yeah, and I'm not too far off from you, right? Similar type of 10-point loss for the Lions. I have it going 34-24 in the favor of the Ravens. And like you said, I just don't know if it's the best matchup on paper. I think the Lions did a lot of great things against Chicago, and I think they will definitely be trending the right way when these games truly matter. Not saying they don't matter now, but once we're getting to, ramping up for the postseason, I think they will be playing their best football. But I do think there's just a few too many things that the Lions have to contend with. And I don't know if they necessarily have the horses in every aspect to deal with what Baltimore is going to throw at them on Monday night. All right. So there you guys go. It's a clean sweep for the Ravens. For those of you that ever say that, hey, us over here at Pride Detroit are just a bunch of homers and all we do is speak positive, this is a prime example of hey, we can pick against our own team. We can read the tea leaves and at least give an objective opinion on this game as well. Any final thoughts? Anything that we probably left off before we kind of get out of here, guys?
Nope. Sometimes I hate Monday Night Football because I wish away my weekend. You know what I mean? It's Saturday morning. I'm like, dang, I wish it was Monday. And I'm like, what? So I wanted to throw that out there.
It's also weird because you still have to get up and go to work on Tuesday. And
yeah, it's bull.
It's not great. And if the Lions don't win, then it's just going to make Tuesday crappy.
Oh, I'm going to be in a bad mood for sure. Don't talk to
me.
Brother,
you and me both. All right, guys. Well, that's pretty much going to do it for us over here at Before the Roar. If you are looking for any more additional Lions content, first of all, you can find that over here on the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel over at youtube.com/Pride of Detroit. We have plenty of videos. Like I said, you can now find this full podcast over on YouTube. You can also find the other podcasts that we have. You can find the Midweek Mailbag. You can also find the POD cast. All of those are live streamed. This is one of the only few podcasts that are pre-recorded. So you can kind of fast forward as much as you want on that case. And it's not nearly as long. And any other additional Lions content, you can always find that over at prideofdetroit.com. Whether it's film breakdowns, whether it's recaps of the game, whether it's any of those things, all of that is over on the website. And like I said, if you want to support us over on YouTube, go ahead, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell. It helps out the channel immensely, and it also makes it that much easier for you guys to find our content in the future. So with all that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. He's Brandon. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll see you guys in the next one.